Hi everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel Dr.Sreenivas Medical Concepts and my FB page Dr. Sreenivas Concepts. This is Dr. Sreenivas, neurologist from Andhra Pradesh, India. I am also the medical author of the book Focused Neurology. Today we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, the clinical localization of peripheral nerve pathology. The clinical localization of peripheral nerve pathology. So the peripheral nerve pathology can present in various clinical ways. By just looking at the clinical presentation and evaluation, we can localize the peripheral nerve pathology, whether it is axonal or demyelinative. What is peripheral nerve and what is peripheral neuropathy? The peripheral nerves are the nerves which are away from the brain and the spinal cord. The first and second cranial nerves are the extensions of the brain. So, the third, fourth, fifth, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. These cranial nerves are peripheral nerves because first and second are extensions of the brain and central nervous system. And the nerves which come from the anterior horn cells, dorsal root ganglia, they form, the roots join together and form the nerves. So these are all peripheral nerves. So brain and spinal cord, to put it very simply and to cut the long story short, brain and spinal cord form the central nervous system. The cranial nerves and the nerves emerging out from the spinal cord are the peripheral nerves. So if there is a disease of these nerves, we call that as peripheral neuropathy. Okay, the peripheral nerve has got basically two important structures. The core, the central body, which forms the central part of the nerve, is called as an axon. And the covering of the central part, the central structure of the peripheral nerve, we call it as myelin sheath. So the central part of a peripheral nerve, we call it as an axon. And the covering of the peripheral nerve, we call it as a myelin sheath. Why is this important? This is important because the prognosis and treatment are going to differ. The prognosis for myelin sheath pathology, the demyelinative peripheral nerve disease, is far better than the pathology which affects the axon, the axonal neuropathy. So we need to clinically localize whether it is an axonal pathologic process or demyelinating pathologic process, because if it's going to be demyelinative peripheral neuropathy, the pathologic process affecting the myelin sheath, the prognosis is far better. The treatment is also, we have a specific treatment also for demyelinative neuropathies unlike axonal neuropathies. So what are all the clinical presentations, the differentiation clinically between axonal neuropathy and demyelinative neuropathy? Even before we begin the discussion on the differentiation between the clinical manifestations of axonal neuropathy and demyelinative neuropathy, we shall have in our mind that the classic example of axonal neuropathy is diabetes mellitus, and the classic example of demyelinative neuropathy is Guillain-Barré syndrome, the GBS. If we have this in mind and then start our differentiation, it is easy to understand the concepts, the clinical concepts and the differentiation between the axonal neuropathy and the demyelinative neuropathy. So axonal neuropathy, the classic example is diabetes mellitus, and the demyelinative neuropathy, the classic example is Guillain-Barré syndrome. The axonal neuropathy, it affects the axons and slowly it starts affecting the axons. The pathological process goes on very slowly. So the onset is insidious, chronic, running to months and years. Whereas in a demyelinative neuropathy, when the pathological process affects the myelin sheath, only the covering is affected. So the covering can easily get disrupted. And since the myelin sheath is necessary for conduction velocity, once the demyelination takes place and the myelin sheath gets affected, the rapid conduction velocity gets affected, and therefore the onset is very rapid. Example, Guillain-Barré syndrome. They present very fast. Why they present very fast? Because the myelin sheath is responsible for conduction of velocity. The saltatory conduction, when the axon is well myelinated, an impulse jumps from one node of Ranvier to the other node of Ranvier, like a kangaroo. So this is known as a saltatory conduction, and therefore the conduction is very rapid. The conduction through axon is not as rapid as we see in myelin sheath. And therefore, when the myelin sheath gets affected, the saltatory conduction gets affected, and therefore the onset is very rapid. Example, Guillain-Barré syndrome. The axonal neuropathy, example, diabetes or toxins, the progression is gradual. As I said, it will take months and years. In fact, diabetic neuropathy, the diabetes affecting the peripheral nerves causing axonal type of neuropathy, takes years for it to become clinically manifest. But here the progression is very rapid. Demyelinating neuropathy, example, Guillain-Barré syndrome. We need to be very vigilant when we are encountering a person suffering from demyelinating neuropathy like GBS. Why? The progression is very rapid. It can go and affect the respiratory muscles in a matter of few days, and patient may go for respiratory embarrassment, respiratory difficulty, and may even die of respiratory failure. So we have to be very vigilant, gauge his respiratory status on a day-to-day basis. If the respiration really deteriorates, we have to put him on ventilator, because it's a reversible process. It can again get remyelinated. So it's a reversible process. It's a treatable condition. We should be alert, astute in diagnosing this condition and put him on a ventilator. But how do at the bedside we diagnose that whether a person is going for a respiratory compromise, a respiratory embarrassment, respiratory difficulty or not? At the bedside, we can find out whether the person is going to have a respiratory compromise by a method known as single breath count. Single breath count. So on the day one, we ask him to take a deep breath, inspire, hold, and ask him to count numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Fine. Record the numbers, say 20, 25. The next day when we come on rounds, again ask him to take a deep breath and ask him to count the numbers without taking another breath and see the numbers. If the numbers are almost the same, the number which he has counted is almost the same, that means his respiratory muscles are intact, it's functioning well. But in case he's going for a respiratory failure, respiratory muscle fatigability, so his single breath count comes down, and when he takes a deep breath, 1, 2, 3, and then he has to expire and take another deep breath. So assessment of the single breath count on a day-to-day basis is very important and essential for demyelinating neuropathy, example Guillain-Barré syndrome, because the progression is very rapid. In case it rapidly progresses, we have good treatment in the form of ventilator. Put him on ventilator. Few days he'll be on ventilator, and then he's going to eventually recover, because after all the process is a demyelination, not an axonal neuropathy. It can again get remyelinated. So the progress is very rapid in a demyelinated neuropathy, rapid progression. Axonal neuropathy, we don't have a specific treatment. It goes on. There is no or slow recovery. For example, diabetic neuropathy, we can't do much about it. There is almost no recovery or very, very slow recovery. But in myelopathy like Guillain-Barré syndrome, they rapidly recover within weeks because of remyelination. Example, Guillain-Barré syndrome. If you are able to tide over the crisis for about 2 to 3 weeks, eventually they are going to recover, because the axon is intact, only the myelin sheath is affected. So once the myelin sheath is lost, it will take a few days for it to get remyelinated again, and therefore the recovery is very good for demyelinating neuropathy, unlike axonal neuropathy where there is no or very slow recovery. Because in myelination, when there is a demyelinating process, remyelination can always occur. Demyelination followed by remyelination. Right. Very important clinical point. Axonal neuropathy is a length-dependent neuropathy. I reiterate, axonal neuropathy is a length-dependent neuropathy. What does this mean? It means that the distal parts of the nerve are more affected than the proximal parts. So the musculature or the skin supplied by the distal parts of the nerve are more affected than the proximal parts. Why? Because when there's an axonal neuropathy, when the axon gets affected, axonopathy, it is the distal part which does not get good nutrition. It has to travel a long distance. So when the axon gets affected, the nutrients get depleted, but the distal most parts get affected first, followed by still little proximal part, and then more proximal part, and then the most proximal part. So it is from the distal to the proximal. So it is known as a length-dependent neuropathy. So in a length-dependent neuropathy, axonal neuropathy, example diabetes, the distal most parts are affected. Slowly they start ascending. Length-dependent, the more the distal the part, the more it gets affected. But myelopathy, demyelinative disease, is a length-independent neuropathy. Proximal and distal parts get affected equally, because it is the myelin sheath which is getting affected, not axon. So both the proximal and the distal parts can get affected equally. So in diabetic neuropathy, you would have noticed that the sensations are lost in the distal parts, the muscle is weak in the distal parts. But in Guillain-Barré syndrome, demyelinated disease, it's an ascending type. It almost affects equally, globally. The proximal muscles are almost simultaneously affected along with the distal muscles. So it's a length-independent neuropathy, very important point. And in axonal neuropathy, sensory is more affected than the motor. Sensations are affected more than the motor. In fact, they have a glove and stocking type of sensory loss. What is glove and stocking type of sensory loss? We would have seen in cricket, the batsman wears gloves and tries to cover up his hands. So that particular part of the hand which is covered by gloves gets affected. So till the wrist and just till the wrist it gets affected, the wrist crease. And stocking, we see the nurses wearing socks covering up to the level of knees. So these are the parts which get affected in an axonal neuropathy like diabetes. Glove and stocking type of sensory loss. And a very important clinical point to differentiate whether it is a true axonal neuropathy or a hysterical sensory loss. Very important clinical point. Once the sensory loss starts occurring from the distal to the proximal parts, it starts with the feet, because they are the lengthier part. They are lengthier than the hand. The lower limb nerves are lengthier than the upper limb nerves, and therefore it is the feet which gets affected first, because they are the lengthiest and the distal most parts get affected. So once it gets affected, the foot, it starts ascending and comes to the level of knees. But once it comes to the level of knees, the length becomes almost similar. The lower limb length up to the knees and the upper limb length becomes almost similar. So the moment the sensory loss occurs and starts touching the knees, the sensory loss should have started occurring in the fingers, the distalmost parts of the fingers, and then it starts affecting, getting proximal. And therefore, if a person says he's got distal sensory loss from the feet to the knee and even to the thighs, but the upper limbs are normal, it is hysterical. It cannot be, because it's a length-dependent neuropathy. So the moment the distal parts get affected and comes out to the level of the knee, the length of the lower limb till the knee and the upper limb are almost similar. So once the knees gets affected, the sensory loss should start getting affected in the hands also, upper limbs also, and it should start spreading. So a person who's got axonal neuropathy like diabetes, who's got sensory loss, knee and coming up to the thighs, his hands would have already got affected. Very important clinical point. Whereas in a demyelinated neuropathy like Guillain-Barré syndrome, motor gets more affected than sensory. In axonal neuropathy, since it's a length-dependent neuropathy, the distal muscles, weakness is limited to the distal muscles. We have the feet weakness, we have the hand weakness. Whereas here, both the proximal and distal parts get affected in a demyelinated neuropathy like Guillain-Barré syndrome. Likewise, the reflexes get affected in the distalmost parts in the axonal neuropathy, because it's a length-dependent neuropathy. The ankle reflex gets affected. The other reflexes may not get affected. In case it gets affected very late, like knee jerk. But here, all the jerks almost get affected equally. Global loss of all reflexes. Example, Guillain-Barré syndrome. When a person comes with features suggestive of Guillain-Barré syndrome, the demyelinated neuropathy, all reflexes are equally lost. It's not that only the ankle reflex are lost and the proximal reflexes are spared. All reflexes, global reflexes are lost because it's a length independent neuropathy. Demyelinated disease like Guillain-Barré syndrome. Axonal neuropathy, the cranial nerves gets affected because it affects the center of the nerve. The vascular compromise is there in the third nerve and sixth nerve. There's a very important point here. The axonal neuropathy like diabetes, when it affects the cranial nerves like third nerve, it affects the center part. And therefore, the peripherally placed pupillary fibers, the parasympathetic pupillary fibers do not get affected. So, this is otherwise known as pupil sparing diabetic third nerve palsy. Why the pupil does not get affected? Because pupillary parasympathetic fibers are superficially placed, whereas diabetic third nerve palsy is an ischemic compromise, so it affects the center of the third nerve. So it causes all the other manifestations of third nerve palsy like drooping of the eyelid because of the levator palpebrae superioris involvement. The medial rectus is involved, so lateral rectus will overact supplied by sixth nerve, so they'll have double vision, they'll have divergent squint, and the pupil, the dilatation of the pupil is not seen, and if at all it is seen very last because pupillary parasympathetic fibers are placed superficially, whereas the diabetic third nerve palsy affects the center of the nerve. So axonopathy can affect the third nerve, sixth nerves due to ischemic changes. In demyelinated neuropathy, also cranial nerves are also very common, especially the seventh cranial nerve is very common. In fact, in Guillain-Barré syndrome, we always check out on the seventh cranial nerve. So demyelination process affects the cranial nerves, especially the seventh cranial nerve. The axonal neuropathies are usually symmetrical. They are very much symmetrical. Right side and left side of the leg, right side and left side of the hand are almost equally affected, and they tend to get equally getting affected also. The progress is also almost on a symmetrical basis, whereas in a demyelinating neuropathy it may be asymmetrical. In an axonal neuropathy, the cerebrospinal fluid evaluation, the protein is normal, whereas in a demyelinated neuropathy like a Guillain-Barré syndrome, the cerebrospinal fluid shows an increased protein because it's a demyelinative process. An immunological response occurs, and therefore the proteins in the CSF increases. Axonal neuropathy, as I said earlier, there is nothing much can be done. It may be only a symptomatic treatment. But for a demyelinated neuropathy, we have specific treatment like immunoglobulins. We give IV immunoglobulins. We can give plasma exchange. So there's a specific treatment for demyelinative disease, and there's a good prognosis and there's a good recovery for demyelinated disease. There's not much treatment, and prognosis is bad for axonalpathy. So the clinical evaluation is very important, especially at the bedside, because the prognosis is going to be different. The progress is going to be different. The progress is very slow, and the prognosis is going to be very bad in axonal neuropathy. Here, the recovery is very fast and the prognosis is very good for demyelinated neuropathy. Since the treatment and since the recovery and the prognosis is better for demyelinated neuropathy as compared to the axonal neuropathy, at the bedside when we try to evaluate clinically, we are trying to find out at the bedside the primary problem, whether it is axonal or demyelinated. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my lecture. I have really enjoyed giving this lecture. If you have any suggestions or comments, kindly post onto my YouTube channel, or please like and subscribe my YouTube channel, Dr. Sreenivas Medical Concepts, and my FB page, Dr. Sreenivas Concepts. Thank you. Bye.